Welcome to Crime Clueless. We're your hosts. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Lara.
I'm Krista.
And I'm Kayla.
Are you guys ready for the second part of the Tylenol murders?
Yes, I would like to know how it ends.
Yeah, I would too.
Okay, well, thanks.
At least figure out what else they looked into and what they did find out.
Yeah, there's some, I find it fascinating. So
I think we're good.
Yeah. This was no ordinary crime. It was calculated, it was cruel, and it left an entire nation on edge. As the investigation ramped up, questions swirled. Who could be capable of such a horrific act? And what would drive someone to commit such a senseless, random act of violence? The Tylenol murders launched one of the largest criminal investigations in U.S. history. More than 100 investigators, including the FBI, the FDA, and local law enforcement, joined forces to solve the case. But this wasn't a straightforward crime scene investigation. It was a logistical and forensic nightmare. Investigators began by analyzing the tainted bottles of Tylenol looking for clues. Each bottle was carefully examined for fingerprints, fibers, or any other evidence that might point to the perpetrator. They traced the distribution routes of the contaminated products, hoping to uncover a pattern, but this only deepened the mystery. The bottles came from different factories, confirming the tampering didn't happen during manufacturing. It had to be someone with access to multiple stores across the Chicago area, someone who deliberately planted the poisoned capsules back on the shelves. The Tylenol murders left investigators grasping for answers. Without a clear suspect or motive, they were forced to explore multiple theories, each one as chilling as the last.
My question is, did they not have a good amount of security cameras in the drugstores?
Not in 82. That's why the only picture that we have is that one from the ATM.
That's wild.
Right? And I'm not exactly sure when they started putting them in more often, but they didn't have them for any of the stores that had the contaminated. And that one only got it because someone was taking money out at that exact moment.
Yeah, it was from an ATM, not
Right.
security at the store.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're left wondering who would commit such a heinous act and why. Let's break down the most compelling possibilities. One of the earliest theories was that the murders were a random act of terror meant to sow fear and chaos. The randomness of the victims, spanning age, gender, and location, suggested there was no personal connection between the killer and those who died. This led authorities to believe the act was designed to strike at the very fabric of trust in everyday life. Tylenol wasn't just a product, it was a household staple. By targeting something so universal, the killer achieved what every act of terror aims to do: instill fear in the masses. Did the killer enjoy watching the panic unfold on the news? Could they have seen themselves as some sort of anarchist or vigilante?
I also wonder if they maybe had a vendetta about Tylenol or someone that worked at Tylenol, or I don't know, something like that.
That is actually the next theory.
Oh,
Good job, Krista.
Yep.
Thank you.
That's exactly what they looked at next. Maybe someone who was a competitor of Johnson & Johnson. Was this an attempt to destroy the company's reputation? The cyanide capsules were introduced at the retail level, meaning the perpetrator bypassed the manufacturing process entirely. This raised the possibility of corporate sabotage by a competitor or even possibly a disgruntled former employee. Johnson & Johnson was a market leader, and their brand represented safety and reliability. Tampering with their flagship product would be an effective way to undermine that trust. This theory came with a major flaw. The killer didn't target Johnson & Johnson directly. There were no ransom demands or statements blaming the company, just the silent, deadly capsules.
And there was no statement or anything ever provided?
Not to Johnson & Johnson, no.
Not even to the public or anything?
There was a letter sent that we'll talk about in a second, but there wasn't anything that was put in newspapers or out to the media. Sometimes, serial killers or
Yeah,
people.
a manifesto or something.
Exactly. Another similar theory to someone targeting Johnson & Johnson that investigators considered was whether the crime was a vendetta against specific stores or distributors. All the poison bottles were found in the Chicago metropolitan area, suggesting the killer had access to multiple locations. Could they have been targeting a specific retailer, such as Walgreens or Jewel Osco? If the tampering was an act of revenge or a vendetta, why didn't the killer make their motive clear? This silence left investigators puzzled, as most crimes of revenge involve some kind of messaging or warning.
And that's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
If you have some kind of vendetta against Johnson & Johnson or some retail store, don't go killing random people.
Random, innocent.
Innocent 12-year-old girls. That is so sad
Mm-hmm.
and not fair to those people. They
No.
didn't do anything.
Yep.
If that is the purpose,
Right.
or it's just someone who's psychopath wanting to.
Which leads into our next
Awful.
theory. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I did want to say with that, the one that we just went over, that theory we just went over, the blister packs from Mary from the hospital, that doesn't really fit with this either.
It doesn't.
That's a good point.
So,
Yep.
I don't know.
That theory didn't pan out. I think, in my opinion, it makes the least amount of sense.
Yeah.
Especially with what you just talked about, Laura.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and some people don't think that same way.
That's true.
They're just angry, trying to get back at somebody, and they don't care who they hurt,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
which is senseless. Like
If they're
Kayla said.
trying to cause widespread panic and distrust of a company, then they wouldn't necessarily target anyone specific if they
Yeah.
just want vendetta against a company. They just want to perpetuate chaos
Right.
and fear.
So it makes more sense to me against Johnson & Johnson as opposed to these specific stores like the
Right.
Walgreens.
Really sad.
Yeah, it is.
It is really sad. Some experts suggested the Tylenol murders might have been the work of a budding serial killer testing their methods. Instead of targeting individuals directly, the killer experimented with a method that allowed them to harm multiple people without any personal interaction. This theory painted the perpetrator as a cold, calculating individual fascinated by the anonymity of their crime. If true, it's possible the Tylenol murders were just the beginning of their twisted career, or that they moved on to other methods of killing that have yet to be linked to this case. And this theory scares me,
Yeah. They could be out
Probably
there doing
the
who knows
most.
what.
right?
Mhm.
Along those lines, the idea of a lone wolf killer, a single individual acting without a larger agenda, has always been one of the strongest possibilities. This person could have acted out of a deep-seated resentment towards society, using Tylenol as a weapon. It's staple household item, something everybody has, everybody purchases.
Well, and they know that they're going to get multiple victims this way.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not some one-off that someone's buying.
Mm-hmm. This theory is supported by the randomness of the victims and the lack of clear motive. A lone wolf killer might not have sought recognition or notoriety, which is why they never claimed responsibility for the murders. This silence has left investigators and the public alike wondering, what kind of person commits such a horrific act and then simply disappears? As news of the Tylenol murder spread, reports of other product tampering incidents emerged. Some of these were later debunked as hoaxes or opportunistic copycats trying to stroke further panic. However, these reports added a layer of complexity to the investigation. Could the killer have used these copycats to muddy the waters? If so, it was a disturbingly effective tactic, as it forced investigators to divide their focus between the original crime and potential new threats. Among the many leads pursued during the Tylenol murder investigation, one name loomed larger than the rest: James W. Lewis. A former tax consultant with a troubled past, Lewis would become the prime suspect in one of the most infamous unsolved cases in American history. But despite his high-profile connection to the case, no direct evidence ever linked him to the poisoning. The spotlight fell on James Lewis shortly after the Tylenol murders made national headlines. On October 6th, just days after the first deaths, a chilling extortion letter was sent to Johnson & Johnson, the manufacturer of Tylenol. The letter demanded $1 million to, quote, stop the killings, and offered instructions for wiring the money to a bank account. This account was linked to a man named Robert Richardson, who had worked with Lewis in the past. Investigators traced the letter back to Lewis, who quickly became a person of interest. When the letter's contents were made public, it captured the nation's attention and raised a critical question. Was James W. Lewis the Tylenol killer, or was he simply an opportunist exploiting the tragedy for personal gain?
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Someone was like, oh, well, they don't know who this is.
Right. They
That's
don't have
funny.
any leads. Lewis's background did little to ease investigators' suspicions. Born in Missouri in 1946, he had a history of legal troubles and erratic behavior. By the time of the Tylenol murders, Lewis had already been charged with fraud and accused of other crimes, including the 1978 killing of a client, Raymond West, whose dismembered body was found in his own home. Although Lewis was not convicted of the murder, the allegations painted a disturbing picture of a man with a violent and manipulative streak.
Do you know why he wasn't convicted of that murder?
So, 2 reasons. The medical examiner was not able to conclusively determine West's cause of death because his body was too decomposed. He was 72 at the time. They didn't feel like they had definitive evidence, which made it challenging to prove.
Okay.
And also, the court found that some evidence against Lewis had been illegally and improperly obtained.
Oh.
He had not been read his Miranda rights during his arrest. The evidence was deemed inadmissible in court.
Ugh.
That makes sense.
So horrible, though.
It's horrible.
We need to talk about how the Miranda rights came to be sometime, because that's really interesting, too. Lewis was also known for his intelligence and his resourcefulness. He had worked as an accountant and a tax preparer and was skilled at crafting elaborate schemes. These traits, combined with his criminal history, made him an ideal suspect in a case that required meticulous planning and willingness to kill indiscriminately. When authorities apprehended Lewis and his wife Leanne in New York City, the couple was staying at a library where Lewis had been researching cyanide and medical poisoning.
Seems suspicious.
Yeah.
Interesting. What a coincidence.
This discovery further deepened suspicions about his potential involvement in the Tylenol murders. Under interrogation, Lewis admitted to writing the extortion letter but denied any role in the poisonings. He claimed the letter was a way to help the investigation, quote unquote, by highlighting vulnerabilities in product safety.
Does he look? We talked about the guy who was standing in the background of the ATM footage. Does he fit that description? Does it look like it could have been him potentially?
Let's see. Yeah, it does look like it could be him. He had thinning dark hair, glasses, a beard.
Were they able to tie him to that location at all then?
Nope.
Ah.
Yeah.
So they never figured out who the guy in the footage was.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
And I mean, with that, you can't conclusively prove that he had anything to, maybe he was just checking out Paula, you know what I mean?
Right. But I mean, that makes it a big coincidence. And he was at technically the scene of the crime.
Despite James Lewis's explanation, investigators were unconvinced as the timing and the tone of the letter seemed calculated to exploit the public's fear. While Lewis's extortion attempt made him a compelling suspect, investigators struggled to find any direct evidence linking him to the cyanide-laced capsules. There were no fingerprints, DNA, or witnesses tying him to the tampered bottles.
Did they search his home at all? Were they able to do that to see if he had any material at his home?
I believe that they did, and they didn't find anything.
Okay.
Ultimately, Lewis was charged and convicted of extortion, not murder. He received a 20-year prison sentence, of which he served 13 years before being released on parole in 1995. While behind bars, Lewis continued to maintain his innocence in the Tylenol murders, insisting that he had no role in the actual poisonings. Despite his conviction for the extortion letter, Lewis's name remained synonymous with the case. The lack of evidence to charge him with murder left a cloud of uncertainty, with many believing he either knew more than he was letting on or had orchestrated the killings without leaving a trace. To this day, James W. Lewis's role in the Tylenol murders remains a topic of debate. Was he the mastermind behind one of the most infamous crimes in American history, or merely an opportunist exploiting the chaos for financial gain? The absence of definitive evidence leaves both possibilities on the table. What is certain is that Lewis's extortion letter added a chilling layer to an already horrifying case. It amplified the public's fear, it cast doubt on the safety of everyday products, and solidified his place in the narrative of the Tylenol murders. His name continues to hover over the Tylenol murders like a shadow, whether he was the architect of the crimes or just a figure on the sidelines. His story is a reminder of how the search for justice in this case has left as many questions as answers. One haunting possibility is that the Tylenol murders were intended as a message, but one left deliberately ambiguous. The silence of the killer might have been the point, forcing society to confront its vulnerability and fear without offering a clear explanation. If this was the motive, the Tylenol murders were terrifyingly effective. The case didn't just claim lives, it shook the public's trust in the most basic aspects of daily life. And perhaps that's exactly what the killer wanted.
Well, maybe the killer had someone who was injured by some kind of medication that because of lack of medication safety,
Right.
they
Yeah.
were angry and wanted to prove a point.
Yeah.
Could have been something like that.
Someone they were close to overdosed, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Or, maybe the wrong medication was in the wrong bottle, just lack of safety. And
Yeah.
Right.
Sounds like this did lead to, as we were talking about tamper-proof packaging, making it a little bit safer for the public moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
I think that's a plausible theory.
and it's really sad if that is what it is, that
Yeah.
they wanted to prove a point and killed a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Definitely not the right way to go about something like that.
Absolutely
No.
not.
But it never makes sense, right?
And when
No.
people are angry and hurt, sometimes they don't make the best decisions.
Mm-hmm. The Tylenol killer didn't just murder 7 innocent people, even though that's really what the story is about. They changed the way the nation viewed safety, trust, and taking something for a headache.
Yeah.
When news of the Tylenol murders broke, it didn't just shock Chicago, it terrified the entire nation. For years, Tylenol had been trusted as a household name and household staple, found in nearly every medicine cabinet. The idea that a product so familiar could turn deadly overnight was unimaginable. As more victims were identified, fear spread like wildfire. Parents scoured their homes, throwing out bottles of Tylenol in a panic. Grocery stores and pharmacies, like we said, pulled all the product from the shelves. The idea of taking some kind of pain reliever now carried a chilling new risk. For many, this was the first time they felt vulnerable to the invisible. Unlike crimes that targeted specific people or locations, the Tylenol murders were indiscriminate. Anyone could be a victim. People began questioning the safety of other products, all other over-the-counter medications like we talked about. Rumors circulated about poisoned food, drinks, other kind of household items, creating really a wave of paranoia. Families started checking for safety labels, expiration dates, and anything else that might seem suspicious. In a world without tamper-proof packaging, the public was left feeling exposed. The media played a crucial role in both informing the public and amplifying the fear.
As they do.
Yep.
Shocking.
Yeah, the least shocking, I think. News outlets reported on the case around the clock, updating viewers on the latest developments and continuing to issue warnings about Tylenol. Images of law enforcement officers removing bottles from shelves became iconic, as did the chilling surveillance footage of Paula Prince buying that fatal bottle of Tylenol. The sight of her in line at the store, moments away from unknowingly sealing her fate, was seared into the public consciousness. Headlines dubbed the perpetrator the Tylenol killer, and the case dominated front page and nightly news for weeks. The intense coverage created a sense of urgency, but also deepened anxiety. People began to wonder, could this happen in our city, in our neighborhood? The Tylenol murders didn't just scare people, they changed behaviors. Consumers began demanding better safety measures for the products they used every day. Lawmakers responded by introducing new regulations requiring tamper-proof packaging for over-the-counter medication.
That fits well into Laura's theory.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely propelled a lot of change.
If somebody had something that happened to a loved one and they tried to make changes and they weren't heard,
Yeah.
none of their concerns were heard, nothing
dismissed.
changed,
Right.
they were dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
So they chose their own route, which is not okay. But
No.
Right.
it did get the response maybe that they were looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. For months, the public remained on edge, scrutinizing every purchase and avoiding Tylenol altogether. Sales of the product plummeted, and it took years for the brand to recover its place in the market. Even those who didn't live in the Chicago area felt the ripple effects as the case became a national symbol of vulnerability.
That's so fascinating to hear because, I mean, here we are, 40 years later?
Mm-hmm.
And, Tylenol again is such a staple. It's trusted. I didn't know about this. So
Mhm.
it's crazy that within only a span of 40 years, they were able to completely kind of turn that around.
Yes. And I wonder how long it took before most people felt comfortable,
Yeah, me too.
right?
I should ask. our
I
parents.
did. They did remember, and they told me how, even though they were in college, they were young, they were far away from the situation, it was still scary. And it wasn't just Tylenol, it was other medications, food, drinks, all sorts of different things that could be tampered with. And nobody knew if it would be in a new town next or if it would be a different product, something more widespread. It sounds like it was really terrifying.
Interesting.
The Tylenol murders left a lasting mark on American culture. The case introduced a new kind of fear. Phrases like product tampering and tamper-proof seals entered the public lexicon, and the case inspired a wave of safety innovations across all industries. Because remember, people weren't just afraid about Tylenol, they were afraid about all medication and all food and all drinks, right?
Well, that makes me think like what I was thinking plausible too, because if it didn't happen again and they didn't actually really find who this
Mhm.
was,
Right.
I kind of think if it wasn't something like that, that maybe it would have happened again.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm surprised they didn't find any evidence they could use.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially that it never happened again. I mean, if it is a serial killer, generally speaking, they're not just kind of one and done.
Right.
So
Not at all.
unless they switch to a different method. But I feel
Yeah.
like if it was some kind of serial killer and he's like, hey, well, that worked, I feel like he would try something again.
And maybe he did. And maybe he was caught,
Maybe.
but never tied to the Tylenol murders, right?
Maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's true
Maybe.
too.
Mhm.
Maybe.
Maybe he got hit by a bus. I don't know.
We'll never know.
Maybe. Hopefully.
Maybe he took one of the pills and was one of the victims that we didn't know about.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's possible
Murder,
too.
suicide.
Mm-hmm. In September 1982, Johnson & Johnson faced an unprecedented crisis. 7 people were dead, and their flagship product, Tylenol, was the center of the tragedy. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Tylenol accounted for nearly 37% of the company's profits, making it not only the trusted household name it was, but a cornerstone of their business. In the face of such a horrifying event, Johnson & Johnson made a bold decision. They prioritized public safety over profits, setting a gold standard for crisis management that is still studied today. Within days of the first deaths, Johnson & Johnson took a dramatic step. They recalled every single bottle of extra-strength Tylenol in circulation. We mentioned this in episode 1. It amounted to over 31 million bottles, which at the time was valued at more than $100 million, which now today is $327 million. By the way, I got the wrong number in part 1. I did a 0 wrong. But 327 million.
So this was only extra strength. So no like regular Tylenol.
Everything I read said extra strength.
Okay.
I would be surprised if people were fine having all the different types still on the
generally the
shelf.
capsules look different too, right?
Yeah. And
So-
I think if they're thinking they're putting it in the capsules, they can't do that to tablets, right?
Yeah, because that would obviously be a red flag that there's something different in here.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm not 100% sure on that detail, but everything in the reporting says extra strength.
Okay.
At the time, it was one of the largest product recalls in history. The company didn't stop at just removing products from shelves. They actively encouraged the public to dispose of any Tylenol they had at home, offering to replace it with new bottles once the crisis was resolved. This move demonstrated their commitment to consumer safety and helped restore some measure of trust. Johnson & Johnson understood the importance of clear and transparent communication. They established toll-free hotlines for concerned customers, providing updates and answering questions. The company's leaders, including then CEO James Burke, appeared on television and in interviews to address the public directly. Burke was frank about the situation, admitting the gravity of the crisis, while assuring consumers that Johnson & Johnson was doing everything possible to protect them. This openness was key in maintaining the public's credibility during such a tumultuous time.
I think that's such a great response on their part. I mean, because they could have just been like, well, this wasn't us, you know.
Mhm. Oh, this was one deranged psychopath out there. It has nothing to do with us. It wasn't manufacturing.
Exactly.
It's not the entire country, right?
Yeah. For them to take such an active role, I
Mhm.
think was smart on their part, especially, you know, as they do want to keep the trust of all of their consumers.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's why their response to this specific situation is still studied today, just because other companies may not have reacted the same or handled such awful situations with the same grace and, you know, public safety first mindset.
Obviously, this is for them a PR nightmare. So,
Right.
I mean, I understand why, you know, people would still study that today.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and even if they can prove it wasn't done at the manufacturing level, some people still aren't going to trust. They're still going to blame them.
Right.
You know, there are going to be people who have that response, whatever it's proved. So,
well, and since you can't prove this specific person did it for this specific reason, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
no one was ever caught or, you know, definitively pinned to this.
Yeah.
So people definitely are still going to blame the company, in my opinion.
yeah,
Oh,
you
I'm
don't know
sure.
if it's a delivery driver. You don't know.
Well, especially as they call it the Tylenol murders, it just becomes forever embedded
Mm-hmm.
with that product.
That's very true. That's such a good point.
And it's not Tylenol extra strength murders. It's
Right.
Tylenol, which is so encompassing. Tylenol extra strength, Tylenol PM, Tylenol regular, you know.
And
Anytime they see any Tylenol name, that's what they're going to think of.
Yes. And they could have named it the cyanide, but they're not because they're linking it to this
Exactly.
household name and they have to get the word out.
Yeah.
And you have to say where it came from. You
Yes.
have to say someone was taking a medication for headaches and
Right.
died. You know, they have to say what it came from.
Yeah. I mean, other companies are going to come out and be like, well, it wasn't us.
Not me.
You know, that's an interesting avenue that I want to research because really, if we don't know that it was directly aimed at Tylenol,
Yeah.
it is interesting that it was only Tylenol.
If they're just trying to create these capsules, it's going to look different from manufacturer to manufacturer, product to product.
Mhm.
It's easier to create one pill, one capsule, and just distribute it that way.
But I mean, they could have bought ibuprofen or aspirin or Motrin in the same capsule type things and filled those up.
If they come in a capsule,
Right.
because I know Advil comes in like a soft gel
Mm-hmm.
and a tablet, and it might be different now from then.
Right.
But you might have to look at the time what did come in a capsule form that you could buy over the counter.
Right.
Because Motrin or ibuprofen, I don't know, they might not have had a capsule that was as
Right.
easily accessible
Mm-hmm.
or one that was as easy to take apart and put back together. Maybe
But-
they bought a few and the Tylenol was the easiest one to reassemble.
But did they do that? Because you could
don't
buy
know.
just capsules and then they can make them look however they want.
Well, most of the time a capsule medication says on it what it is. And if it looked different, if it wasn't the same color,
But it was the same outside.
yeah, it was the same outside. So they
Okay,
didn't
so
just
they
create
did
a
buy it.
capsule.
They dumped out what was in there and refilled.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because you wouldn't be able to stamp Tylenol or whatever it does say on there, because a lot of times on the capsule it will say like Tylenol.
I don't always look though.
But if
If
you
it
had a
looks
blue
the
one and a
same.
white one,
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like if, you know, it was red and white and they just colored it red and white, I'm not always going to notice that one of them doesn't say Tylenol.
This says that aspirin was available in capsule form, that there were antihistamines that were available in capsule form.
Yeah, antihistamines wouldn't have
Antibiotics.
gotten as many people.
Yeah. And that might be why they picked Tylenol too. It was the biggest, most widely used.
And some people don't take ibuprofen because
Mhm.
it can have a blood thinning effect.
Right.
So more people take Tylenol probably than ibuprofen.
Well, and Tylenol helps with fevers too. So a lot of times, there's more of a use for it.
Yeah.
Unless I'm wrong, Miss Nurse.
You can use both, but
Oh, okay.
I mean, Tylenol is what they usually prescribe if you have a fever.
Yeah.
But the anti-inflammatory products of ibuprofen is also going to help with that too.
Right.
But more people can usually take Tylenol because it's gentle on your stomach too. Like if you have ulcers or things like that, then you don't take ibuprofen.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah.
Learning so much from you today.
I guess so.
We always do. From the outset, Johnson & Johnson collaborated closely with law enforcement and federal agencies, including the FBI and the FDA. They provided access to internal records, manufacturing processes, and distribution networks to help track the source of the contamination. The company also partnered with the media to issue public warnings about the tampered Tylenol. Together, they worked to spread the message, do not use Tylenol until it is declared safe. This collaboration further reinforced Johnson & Johnson's commitment to public safety. When the investigation unfolded, Johnson & Johnson took the opportunity to address the vulnerability that made the crime possible, the lack of tamper-proof packaging. At the time, over-the-counter medications were sold in simple, unsealed bottles, making it easy for someone to tamper with the contents undetected.
You know what I'm thinking too, as we go back to that theory about someone that they loved? What if it was a kid? Because if it wasn't tamper-proof, if they didn't have child-proof, I'm wondering if maybe it was someone's child who got into a bottle.
That could be an overdose. Yeah.
And the loved one who may have been injured by that is what you mean?
Yeah.
Not a kid who did this.
No.
I was like, wait.
Sorry, it makes sense in my head if you could read my mind. No, I'm saying that the person who did this, maybe their child was, messing around with it, thought it was candy, something like that, causing the public to be more aware.
Yeah.
Hey, this can happen to anyone.
Right. That's very possible. And since we don't know,
right,
we can only speculate. In the wake of the crisis, Johnson & Johnson pioneered the use of tamper-evident packaging, which included foil seals, plastic wrap, and childproof caps. These innovations quickly became the industry standard and were later mandated by the FDA. That leads back to what you were saying. They didn't have childproof caps at the time. By the end of 1982, the Tylenol brand was in crisis, sales had plummeted, and some wondered if the product could ever recover. Johnson & Johnson launched a bold campaign to relaunch Tylenol, emphasizing their commitment to safety and consumer trust. The company reintroduced Tylenol to the market with triple sealed packaging, along with a major advertising campaign reassuring customers that the product was safe. They offered coupons for free or discounted bottles to encourage consumers to give Tylenol another chance. Their efforts paid off within a year.
Wow.
Tylenol had regained 70% of its pre-crisis market share, a remarkable recovery for a product that many thought was doomed.
Yeah, that's crazy. I was thinking about that. What would it have taken?
Yeah.
And it is that safety
measures,
those safety measures, getting it back.
And I love that they did 3 layers.
Well, and, that's good for them because it's like, hey, we're the only ones in the market now that are tamper-proof.
Right.
Because if you're looking at, maybe Advil at that point, they're not thinking about having to update their...
Yeah, I'm sure they were pretty close behind, though.
I'm sure they were.
Watching what Tylenol was doing to try to keep their lead there.
They probably had to. If Tylenol came out and said, look, ours is safe, I could see people not wanting to buy other products because they're not safe.
Exactly.
Right. And the FDA, mandated it pretty quickly after too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. At the heart of Johnson & Johnson's response was a simple but powerful principle, putting people over profits. CEO James Burke and his team leaned heavily on the company's corporate guiding principles, which emphasized responsibility to consumers and communities above all else. Burke's leadership during the crisis earned widespread praise and cemented his reputation as one of the most effective corporate leaders of his time. Under his guidance, Johnson & Johnson didn't just survive the Tylenol murders. They emerged stronger and more respected than ever. The company's response to the Tylenol murders has become a textbook example of how to handle a crisis. It showed that transparency, swift action, and a commitment to doing the right thing can not only mitigate damage, but also rebuild trust. More importantly, Johnson & Johnson's actions set a precedent for the entire industry. The widespread adoption of tamper-proof packaging and the heightened consumer awareness about product safety are direct results of their proactive measures.
I feel like I should have learned more about this in business school.
Yeah, right.
Like, I feel like this should have been something that I studied.
It seems like something everyone should
Yeah.
in business school, I mean.
Right?
I keep thinking about, I remember when we were little, we were always scared anthrax was going to come in the mail. Do you guys remember that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's what I keep thinking. And I was like, who would send us anthrax? No one cares about us.
But apparently that doesn't matter.
I know.
Right.
Could be anybody. But that was what I thought of.
We should
Yeah.
cover that. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Johnson & Johnson's response to the Tylenol murders wasn't perfect. No response to such a horrific event could be. But their willingness to prioritize public safety and to innovate in the face of tragedy turned a potential corporate disaster into a story of resilience and responsibility. The Tylenol murders also spurred significant legal changes aimed at protecting consumers. In 1983, Congress passed the Federal Anti-Tampering Act, making it a federal offense to tamper with consumer products. The law carries severe penalties, including up to life imprisonment, reflecting the seriousness of the crime. The legislation wasn't just limited to medications, it applied to all consumer goods from food and beverages to cosmetics, ensuring that industries across the board prioritized product safety.
Well, that's really interesting. I was thinking with the manufacturer because they do have to go through a lot of safety checks before they send it out. To send it out and then someone can just tamper with it in the store.
Yeah.
It's so good that they did mandate those additional safety features to keep products safe and non-tampered with in the
Yeah,
stores.
I agree.
So you can have some level of trust when you
Yeah.
buy something.
Johnson & Johnson could have done everything right. They passed all their safety checks. They send it out to the store and then someone still played with it and
Right.
killed people. And that's horrible.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
For the American public, this was a wake-up call. People became more vigilant. Not just now we have the tamper-proof seals. People were checking the tamper-proof seals and scrutinizing the products they purchased. So they're looking at the pills inside. And I think that's another reason this case is important to cover. The reminder that those are important and they're there for a reason.
And
Yeah.
Kayla, you should be checking your pills instead of just throwing them in your mouth.
That's why we're talking about it.
Okay, it's not like I'm popping all kinds of pills over here, okay?
Check your ibuprofen and your Tylenol.
Mm-hmm.
They always look correct, okay?
Do you look?
Okay, it's
Now
not
you
like
will.
I close my eyes, I open the bottle, I'm like, here, let me just take some pills. Like, no.
Now she will, though. Now she'll make sure she's
Now I'm
really
gonna
looking.
triple check, okay?
Yes.
Double check.
And everyone listening, triple check.
I just assume because
at
they
it.
always come tamper-proof that I'm safe, Laura.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's scary, though, the idea that
is.
everyday item can be weaponized.
Yeah.
It changes the way you look at everything that you purchase.
Definitely. I've had some things that I bought. I'm like, oh, is that sealed okay? And I was like, well, it's probably
Yeah. I mean, sometimes like
doing that. Like,
yeah.
Laura,
I
you
need
should stop
this.
doing that.
I know I am now. But I know there are things that I've thrown out because it's
Yeah.
like, oh, that wasn't sealed.
I've taken
or it
stuff
was,
back
this was
before.
open.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to take those things back and understand that there are laws in place for that reason, right?
Yeah.
That's why I like when they do come in the blister packs.
Mm-hmm.
The added level of security.
Not for this case.
Okay, why'd you have to remind me of that?
I mean, the
keep it
heightened
safe.
awareness is important, though.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
Definitely.
For people in 1982, this was a new kind of fear. And like we said, it's not just confined to Chicago, because then you had all the people that were doing copycat type things, and not that they necessarily were real, but the hoax or spreading rumors, things like that. And that's where it comes to all of the different products that we talked about, food, drinks, everything. Unlike targeted crimes, this case shows that anyone, anywhere can become a victim without warning. This influenced the way that people also approach safety in public spaces, from grocery stores to movie theaters. And the reach of the fear from this is just horrifying.
Yeah.
One of the most haunting aspects to me of the Tylenol murders is that the case remains unsolved. Despite decades of investigation, thousands of leads, the identity of the Tylenol killer is still a mystery,
That's crazy.
right?
I feel like now, where there's so many security cameras everywhere, I wonder if that would be the same in this day and age as it was in 1982.
Yeah, me too. I feel like you wouldn't be able to.
No.
Well, because you could even, now most people pay with credit cards,
Mm-hmm.
or there's cameras up by the cash register, so you could easily track everybody who had bought that product and go
Mhm.
follow up on them.
That's true too.
They do. I get things like that. You bought this at Fry's and
Yeah.
it has a
Mhm.
recall now.
Yep.
Well, and especially if you use like a rewards program,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you put in I put in my phone number at Target, and then in the app, it tells me exactly what I bought. It's
Yeah.
online or in store.
Yep.
So there's so many more ways to be able to track who had purchased Tylenol in the area and who could have done this.
Yes, that is very true too, unless they didn't purchase it because there weren't cameras.
Right. They could have stolen it.
We just put it in the store.
Well, she's saying before if they bought something and took it home,
Yes. And use those
they
capsules.
use those capsules to make the new
Oh,
one.
I see what you're saying. Yes. Yes. Oh, it's so haunting. I
Yeah,
wish that we
so
knew
many
how they
possibilities.
did it, and I wish that we knew the why.
Well, and there's so many things with that too. They could have bought a bottle or a whole bunch of bottles in Georgia and then went back up
Oh, yeah.
just to
Yeah.
kind of distance themselves. Like there's so many possibilities with this too. Or maybe they did make their own capsules. We
Mhm.
don't know.
Right.
Could have.
Are there pictures of what they looked like, Jenna?
There are. I'll see if we can find any of those that we can share on our blog.
ADHD brain. I had to
Mhm.
look. So I did try and pull some up on Google, and you can't really tell a difference. I don't think there were a lot of pictures of the ones that were
Tampered.
contaminated. There were pictures of open capsules,
Oh, showing the differences between
like the powders. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So maybe if we do a little more digging, we can find something. But
Yeah.
I did have to look at that.
No, I like that. So the changes that we talked about didn't stop with medications. They didn't even stop with food. It also carried to cosmetics. It carried to cleaners. It carried to all types of products that you would purchase, directly inspired by what happened with Tylenol. Even technology has been influenced. Modern supply chain tracking and quality control systems owe part of their development to the need for greater accountability and transparency after the Tylenol murders. The Tylenol murders shook the nation and left such a black mark on society. 7 lives were lost, countless others were forever changed, and trust in the safety of everyday products was shattered. This case didn't just change the way we package medicine or write laws, it changed the way we live. And yet the question remains, who was the Tylenol killer? Was it James W. Lewis or someone who's never been considered a suspect? Did they act alone, or was there a larger conspiracy at play? More than 40 years later, we're no closer to answers than we were in 1982. The randomness of the crime and the silence of the killer make it one of the most haunting mysteries in American history. But the legacy of the Tylenol murders isn't just fear or unanswered questions. It's about resilience, innovation, and the determination to protect one another. From tamper-proof packaging to the laws that safeguard our products, the changes sparked by this case are a testament to the strength of communities in the face of tragedy. As we wrap up this episode, we want to hear from you, our listeners. What do you think? Could the Tylenol killer still be out there? What theories or suspects stand out to you? I would love to hear what thoughts you have after listening to the different theories that we talked about.
Yeah, any theories that we didn't even come up with.
Exactly.
Yep. Send them our way.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
Really interesting. There's a lot of different things that I think could be at play here. There's a lot of questions still.
Yeah.
But on the wake of a horrible tragedy, good things came from that for our safety, and unfortunate way that it came from.
Definitely a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know. I agree with the theory that you presented. Someone who potentially had tragedy in their life and wanted to see change that maybe wasn't being enacted in any other way, which is definitely not okay. But at least it did cause some good change for the future.
Absolutely.
If that was what happened.
Yeah. Either that or someone that's deranged and lives off of chaos. Right.
You know, that's plausible too, because people are crazy.
Yep. I do wonder if they have any evidence still that they're waiting to test.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe some DNA evidence will emerge.
Right. Something, now they can do touch DNA. They can get a full DNA profile from sweat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Really cool.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of Crime Clueless. We truly appreciate you spending your time with us as we dive into these cases. If you're looking for resources that we used in this episode, head over to our blog. You can find it linked on our website, crimeclueless.com, and you'll find that under the contributors section. And please, if you haven't already, follow us on our social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, etc. Just search for @CrimeClueless. And again, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your thoughts, theories, and what you think about this.
Yep.
And if you were alive when this happened, do you remember if you were throwing out your own products? I would love to hear.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate, review, and share our podcast. Your support means the world to us. You can find Crime Clueless on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, and all major streaming platforms. Remember, refuse to be clueless, careless, or caught off guard.
Not today, murders.
Bye.